Welcome to the Immunic Therapeutics company presentation during 2022 BioEquity conference. Please consider our cautionary note regarding forward-looking statements during this presentation. At Immunic, we are developing a pipeline of next-generation selective oral therapies for chronic inflammatory and autoimmune diseases. In that context, we have established a pipeline of 3 products which are currently in clinical development. Our most advanced asset, Vidofludimus calcium, is currently tested in relapsing MS patients in the so-called ENSURE clinical trials, supported also by a phase 2 clinical trial, so-called CALIPER trial in progressive multiple sclerosis, with a certain focus on the potential neuroprotective properties of Vidofludimus calcium. We're quite excited about ulcerative colitis, where our phase 2 clinical trial, the so-called CALDOS-1 trial, is planning to read out in June of this year top-line data from the induction of remission part of the trial. Our second molecule, Immunic, is an oral IL-17 inhibitor by targeting the transcription factor RORγt. Immunic is, to our knowledge, the first selective RORγt inverse agonist for treating psoriasis patients. In this phase 1 clinical trial has completed already the healthy volunteer portions, the part A and B, SAD and MAD portion for 14-day treatment of healthy volunteers, and is currently now tested in psoriasis patients. We expect the data from this portion of the trial already being available in the second half of this year. In parallel to the activity on psoriasis, we're also testing Immunic in patients suffering from castration-resistant prostate cancer. First CRPC safety data is expected in the third quarter of this year. Finally, our third clinical stage molecule, Immunic, is targeting the so-called intestinal barrier function. So the idea is to restore the proper intestinal barrier function in patients with gastrointestinal diseases. Immunic is targeting a new yet undisclosed molecular target. And we are currently testing the drug in a phase 1 clinical trial in Australia. We have completed the SAD portion and are currently working on the MAD portion of this trial. And we hope to be able to report safety data in the third quarter of this year from both parts. But let me spend some time on our lead asset, Vidofludimus calcium. Quite interesting mode of action. It's a selective immune regulator. And it can do this by targeting DHODH, dehydroorotate dehydrogenase, which is the rate-limiting step of just the de novo synthesis of pyrimidines. And this is interestingly only relevant in hyperactivated cells where the metabolic turnover of RNA specifically is much higher than in normal cells. Normal cells can address the need for pyrimidine building blocks by just recycling or uptake from the extracellular environment. Whereas for those highly hyperactivated cells, de novo synthesis is required. If we now inhibit DHODH, then selectively in these cells, IMU-838 leads to metabolic stress signaling going up. And this then, in a cascade of actions, leads to stop of transcriptional elongation and production or secretion of proteins like IL-17A and F. The advantage of that selectivity is that it preserves the normal immune cell function and numbers. No non-specific immunosuppression is observed. This maintains vaccination efficacy, and no negative effect is observed on white blood cell count or rates of infections. And I think this is a perfect target for targeting selective immune regulation in IBD patients. And I think the unmet medical need here is as a well-tolerated, safe oral drug for moderate to severe patients, which are no longer responding to traditional immune modulators or corticosteroids, and offering patients a new treatment option before the need to switch on a biological treatment like anti-TNF antibodies, Entyvio or Stelara. As I said, we are planning to read out the phase 2 clinical trials, so-called CALDOS-1 trial. All in all, in this trial, 3 active doses are tested with 10, 30, and 45 milligram of IMU-838. We have randomized 263 patients. Quite excited about the readout, which is expected to happen in June of this year. The primary endpoint is clinical remission according to the FDA 2016 clinical guideline for ulcerative colitis, which is the proportion of patients with symptomatic remission and endoscopic healing at week 10. But let me switch over to our quite impressive MS data. As I said, we are currently testing in phase 3 clinical trial in our MS patients and phase 2 in progressive MS patients. But going back here to the positioning, I think the drug really has something to offer for patients and for treating neurologists. And I think the biggest advantage here is that the drug has shown very good activity in the phase 2 clinical trial so forth, and an outstanding safety and tolerability profile. So it could really qualify for the easy to use next-based medication for MS patients. But as I said, we have obtained wonderful phase 2 clinical data. This is here the updated data set, including the 2 cohorts, cohort 1 and cohort 2, therefore now spanning from placebo over 10 to 30 and 45 milligram dose compared here, and impressively suppressing the MRI lesion activity in 30 and 45 milligram dose groups, whereas 10 milligram low dose had only moderate MRI lesion reduction activity. Just to mention that the primary endpoint were met with very high clinical significance level of 0.0002 and 1. So that's quite encouraging data. What I think is also very relevant for patients is here the change of EDSS disability score from baseline to week 24. On the right, you can see that in all 3 active doses, 10, 30, and 45 milligram, patients were benefiting with lower EDSS progression up to week 24 compared with placebo. Another important marker for neurodegeneration is neurofilament light chain. This is a protein which can be tested in the serum of patients. And here we have seen, interestingly, a dose-dependent reduction, starting with 9% reduction at 10 milligram, 18% at 30, and 26% reduction with 45 milligram once daily oral dose of Vidofludimus calcium. That's impressive data, and we think this hints to the potential of the drug to prevent neurodegeneration in MS patients. And based on these dose response findings, we decided to continue our development in multiple sclerosis with 2 different doses. On the left side, for the Ensure clinical trials in relapsing MS patients, we decided to go forward with 30 milligram oral dose once daily, whereas on the right, for the phase 2 Caliper trial in progressive MS patients, we decided to use 45 milligram Vidofludimus calcium once daily, specifically based on the very strong NFL data hints here. What is an important feature here from the patient's point of view is the outstanding safety profile Vidofludimus calcium has shown so far in clinical development. And comparing here with other oral drugs and base medications for MS patients, we believe that this qualifies Vidofludimus calcium as really a very promising therapeutic options for neurologists and for the patients. But let me share some thoughts on our second molecule, IMU-935, which is in phase 1 development now being tested in patients. IL-17 pathway antibodies have been very successful in demonstrating activity in psoriasis patients and are broadly used. And oral drugs like apremilast, Otezla are commercially quite successful, but we see there's a gap between those two. So what would be of benefit would be to have, on the one hand, activity on the same level as IL-17 pathway antibodies have shown, on the other hand, to have the convenience of a safe oral drug. So therefore, we are developing 935. It's a very potent molecule in human cell culture testing single-digit nanomolar inhibition concentrations here regarding IL-17A, F, and interferon gamma. That's, I think, quite promising, a very potent molecule. On the other hand, the key advantage here compared with the whole group of potential alternative molecules or competing molecules is the selectivity. And so far we are only aware of our drug having shown selectivity on blocking very potently cell differentiation into Th17 cells, blocking the cytokine production of IL-17A, F, and interferon gamma, but not impacting the physiological maturation of T cells within the thymus. And that was also demonstrated here on the right in the middle. You see the green line of Immune 935 compared with vehicle. There was no toxic effect on thymocyte maturation observed at our collaboration partners lab at Sun from City of Hope, whereas literature reported reference molecules, raw gamma T inhibitors and inverse agonists, MRL-871 and compound 1 here as examples, have shown a very clear cytotoxicity in these systems, which is intrinsically a safety risk for such molecules. We think we as Immunic have solved the selectivity problem for the first time. And therefore, we are very proud to have the molecule now in clinical testing. We have completed the 14-day part B. Recently, have reported the data last December in detail. You can find this on the webpage. But now we're very excited about part C going on. So we're now testing Immune 935 in moderate to severe psoriasis patients receiving 28 days of treatment of either 150 milligram once daily or twice daily, and each of these groups compared with placebo. To summarize the company, we have an advanced pipeline of 3 differentiated products, various stages of development. The RMS phase 3 program of Vidofludimus is ongoing and is supported by a quite interesting phase 2 trial in progressive MS patients with a focus on neuroprotection potential of Vidofludimus. You see data is coming up soon. In June of this year, we expect to have the 10-week induction data available. On the other hand, we have a second molecule, oral IL-17 inhibitor 935, which is, we believe, clearly a best-in-class molecule. And we hope to be able to demonstrate proof of concept in psoriasis patients in the second half of this year. Our third asset, Immune 856, which could be a game changer in treating chronic GI disorders, is currently in phase 1 testing, and we hope to be able to report also data in the third quarter of this year from the clinical healthy volunteer portions of the trial. And just to complete the summary here, our cash runway is through Q1 2023 with around about 28 million shares outstanding. And with this, I would like to thank you for listening and your attention to Immunic Therapeutics as a company. Thank you.